So we scheduled this next panel to talk about that. We're waiting for Nick to return, and here he is. Yeah.
I was saying that have been
So I saw a fellow come in wearing one of those shirts that said "Enjoy Capitalism." Did you see that? It's like a Coca-Cola style.
Oh, I have, yeah.
And I was hoping he would stick around. I actually found out who created that shirt, and I talked to him a couple of weeks ago. Jason Calley created that when he was working for Bureau Crash.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he since says that he would not use that kind of terminology again. And actually, when he came to PorcFest, I don't remember even which year it was, and he was wearing that shirt, and I said, can I talk to you about what do you mean by that word? And so we started the conversation. That was probably at least 5 or 6 years ago with Jason. Should we ask the audience what they think first, or should we just jump in with? I can talk about how I use it and why, and pass the mic or whatever. And
yeah,
let people jump in.
Yeah,
whatever.
let's give our intro and then let the audience explain, I guess.
There's some things that people don't even know about their own history as libertarians, but there was a libertarian guy named Thomas Hodgkin that coined the term capitalism. I was just informed a little earlier, though, that it was even a guy prior to him, but Hodgkin used it often. I think he was in about the 1830s, and he was referring to this new class that arose essentially in the new industrial age, that had new wealth in the form of capital instead of land, and they were using their capital to influence Parliament to get laws passed in their favor to restrain trade. So if you're a kind of a fundamentalist etymologist or whatever, you'd say, okay, well that's what capitalism means. And then 20 years later or so after that, Karl Marx used the word capital to refer again to that same class, and on and on. And I just recently found a treasure trove of references to all the different writers that used the term capitalism. But basically, when you are using the suffix ism after something, you're saying it's a philosophical school, and if you're saying it's capitalism, it's the philosophical school that supports the holders of capital. So this is the basics of how words like that form. And then in the early 20th century, and maybe a little bit in the late 1800s, some economists of the Austrian school started using the term in actually a different sense. And then Ayn Rand comes along and popularizes it and says capitalism is everything good because it represents freedom. Whereas the original meaning was capitalism is everything bad because it's the restriction of freedom of trade. It's the people of capital using their money to buy favor in the legislature, the parliament, whatever, to restrict trade. So let that sink in. I'll pass to the next guy, and I'm going to go grab a reference on that.
Yeah, so we're just going to give brief sort of intros, either about ourselves or just the terms that we're using and why we're using it, and then we're going to pass it on to the audience. It's going to be pretty audience-driven. Anyway, my perspective on capitalism mostly comes from the individualist anarchist school of thought, so it mostly comes from people like Benjamin Tucker, early Voltaire de Cleyre, Lysander Spooner, people like that. For Benjamin Tucker, what he was talking about when he was talking about capitalism was the fact that labor was not paid its due. Of course, he believed in things that a lot of us here don't agree, and I don't really have any opinion myself on, but the labor theory of value and stuff like that, tried to use that as a way to explain why the system around him that he called capitalism was very much against sort of the individual. Capitalism is a very anti-individualistic kind of system that reduced people down to resources, economic parts that could be used or manipulated however the owners of capital wanted, however the owners of the political class wanted. So I'm mostly coming from an individualist anarchist standpoint within the realm of like Benjamin Tucker. So that's some of where I'm coming from. Mostly why I use it is I feel like the term still holds relevancy and prescience today. And I feel like it's still very much relevant to the sort of system that we currently live under. I also think it's useful to challenge libertarians' perceptions of their history and the terminology they use and the definitions they think about and the associations they make with the movement around us. So I think all these things are important to challenge and question.
I'm not that well read, so I always look at the practical applications to it. And the thing is, economists love, and economist theorists love to separate money and exchange from the rest of the world. You know, like the real world, who's affected by it. You know, this is humans, non-human animals, and environment. And to me, capitalism is not only an economic exchange; it's also a social relation, and that where some people can accumulate incredible amounts of wealth and power, and on the backs of the rest of us. And so when I talk about capitalism, I talk about it in social terms. Because here's the thing: is I don't want to change one economic system for another, because that doesn't create liberation. What I want to do is I want social war. I want us to not even just be treated as equals. I want liberation. I want people to have liberation on their own terms. I want us to have, and so words like capitalism are the holdovers for those for me. It's just a point of reference to talk about these social relations. You know, like, and you know, people try to, like, libertarians have often tried to say, like, well, you know, it's just that capitalism, the way that it exists today, is a bastardization of it. Well, that's what the communists said all my life. I went to Eastern Germany in the 80s. I was a communist. In 1988, I went there and I saw what they had. I was like, this is bullshit. And I was like, this is not what I want at all. This is not the world I want. I mean, they still had hierarchy. They still had racism. They had ethnic cleansing. They had, you know, besides, you know, the industrialization and destruction of the natural world. And all of that was brought about in an economic system. So I started to challenge. Of course, I didn't have deep analysis in 1988. I mean, I'm still a young guy trying to figure things out. But over the decades, I've just continued to develop it more. And the thing is, like, things about social theory, I mean, social value, whatever you call it. Anyway, none of that matters to me. And the thing is, etymology of words don't even matter to me, because we can take and appropriate words to mean anything that we want them to, and people do all the time. Well, I think Orwell called it doublespeak. And so, what do governments do all the time? I mean, my friends David and Brad, who went to prison because of Brandon Darby, they were called collateral damage. Do you know what I mean? Like, so when I talk about capitalism, I always have to talk about what I often say is capitalism and its baggage, because of all the things, the inherent hierarchies within it, the inherent inequalities. They're like, I'm sure there's theorists who have written about it, but I'm a dumb person, and that's the way I see it. And I have to think about, how does it relate to the brother and sister on the block? How does it relate to my poor family? How does it relate to the people that I don't know that are affected by economic exchanges that they have no control over as their communities are destroyed? And so that's the relation I have with it, which is not super sophisticated analysis.
Yeah, but it's still really well said. But anyway, so, I mean, obviously all of us are coming from different perspectives. Jack's a little bit more etymological, coming from more of a historical sort of social theory, and you know, he's looking at it from
freestyle jazz.
Yeah, it's freestyle jazz. So there you go, freestyle jazz against capitalism. All right, so let's open it up to questions. That's the important part of this. I know you had your arm raised first, so let's pass the mic. I don't know if someone could operate the video camera so it's moving.
It's a Beastie Boys song, isn't it?
What? Pass the mic, yeah, I think so. Anyway, I'll pass it.
Hi, my question is for Jack. I'm sorry if I missed, I was a little late here. I just wanted to, because you believe in etymology, that's what you study. I would just like to ask, what exactly is capital, and what is capitalism, and what is the history of these terms?
That's actually a bigger one than I can handle, but I essentially would. I don't think I could restate a definition of capital right now, but in essence.
Can I offer an example, and you can tell me if it is capitalism or not?
Sure.
No, you can keep
Well, the trouble is nobody's going to hear you after.
A seed.
Catch you on mic.
Seeds. Are seeds capital?
You could probably ask me a whole list of things, and I could try to spend all the time here to try to answer all these individual questions. But why don't you offer
Seeds.
your answer?
Our seeds capital.
What's your answer?
Well, say, repeat what he said.
Oh, he says our seeds capital.
Like seeds, like you plant in the ground. I mean, I would assume that they were capital, but if I plant a seed and I nurture the plant that grows.
Nobody's going to hear this.
I'm sorry. If I plant a seed and I nurture the plant that grows, I water it, I weed it, I do all the labor that is involved with producing a fruit. Is that capitalism? I mean, I'm taking the capital investment, I'm taking a seed, I'm adding labor to it, I'm putting it in the ground. I guess if it's not capital, then what is it? And if it is capital, then what's wrong with me engaging in that kind of capitalism where I add labor to capital in order to produce greater value for myself and other people?
You said you do, or
Yeah.
I think I've got a lot to say to that.
Yeah.
A lot of people in the movement here seem to conflate entrepreneurship with capital, like mixing your capital, which could be money, or in your case you're referring to seeds as capital, and your labor, and you get some profitable result. What you engaged in was entrepreneurism, not capitalism. Capitalism implies, and I can read Conkin's quick definition, when you put ism after the word, it means the ideology of. So here's Conkin, what Conkin says. Sometimes the terms free enterprise and capitalism are used to mean free market. Capitalism means the ideology, or ism, of capital, or capitalists. Before Marx came along, the pure free marketeer Thomas Hodgkin had already used the term capitalism as a pejorative. Capitalists were trying to use coercion, the state, to restrict the market. Capitalism, then, does not describe a free market, but a form of statism, like communism. So then he makes the distinction. Entrepreneurship is when you mix your capital, your labor, and you create a product and make a profit. So we're totally all for entrepreneurship and free markets.
On the other hand, if that is what capitalism is, if capitalism can be reduced to, or a good example of it